I still remember when I'm the only Onyame Jesus, an Hollywood actor and their top content creator. Don't forget. I beg, make this video go viral. Watch.
What if I told you that a group of young fighters, armed with little more than history, faith and fire, just outsmarted a trained military force? What if I told you their weapon wasn't just explosives, but a centuries-old pain, and a dream too dangerous to speak? Today, the Amber Boys, Ambazonia's daring resistance fighters, used an ancient explosive called Ogbunigwe to wipe out Cameroonian troops in a move so bold, so precise, that it's sending shockwaves across Africa. And just hours later, a Biafran warrior stepped out, mocking enemies, defying death, and declaring, "Biafra or nothing." But this isn't just war. This is spiritual. A sweating preacher, Pastor Ibu, cried out for every family to arm themselves, warning, "If you're not ready, you'll die alone." This is not fiction. This is not rumor. This is the beginning of something explosive, both literally and politically. Why are two regions, Biafra and Ambazonia, rising together? Why now? What happens next? Stay with us, because what you're about to witness is not just rebellion, it's a revolution, and it's burning louder than ever before. Ambazonia fighters, known as Amber Boys, launched a successful ambush on Cameroonian forces who tried to invade their territory, neutralizing some of them and seizing their weapons. The attack was described as highly coordinated, with the Amber Boys lying in wait and decisively overwhelming the approaching Cameroonian soldiers. This draws a parallel between the Amber Boys and the Biafran Liberation Army, both being committed to their respective struggles, though Biafran fighters face additional internal conflicts. A vocal Biafran fighter boldly criticized the Musa and Asari boys, claiming he was not afraid of dying again and mocking those threatening him on social media. He emphasized his loyalty to the Biafran cause, declaring, "Biafra or nothing," and expressing readiness to confront enemies face to face. A passionate preacher in the video, named Pastor Ibu, urged all Igbos to unite, pray, and prepare for self-defense, stating he would fight if given a gun. He strongly advocated for every Biafran household to possess a weapon, stressing it's necessary for survival and self-protection amid the looming threat. The message condemned passivity, warning that those who don't prepare will be left to suffer alone without sympathy when violence erupts in their communities. Spiritual language was used throughout, with references to Jesus' past sacrifice and a call for Biafrans to take up responsibility for their defense in the present. The news of the Ambazonia fighters striking Cameroonian military forces with the use of an improvised explosive device, famously called Ogbunigwe, has stirred both curiosity and concern. This event, which unfolded like a well-rehearsed act of resistance, was not just a display of defiance against oppression, but also a warning to those who might underestimate the resolve of freedom fighters. The Cameroonian forces, known for their brute tactics and heavily armed squads, were met with something they didn't expect: precision, calculation, and devastating courage from the Amber Boys. Their success in neutralizing part of the invading forces and seizing weapons is not just a battlefield victory, but a loud political statement. To understand how this all began, we need to look at the root of the problem, which, in simple terms, is a tale of two peoples, the Ambazonians and the Cameroonian government, locked in a deep and violent disagreement over identity, control, and justice. Ambazonia, the self-declared independent state located in the English-speaking regions of Cameroon, has long complained of marginalization and oppression by the French-speaking government in Yaoundé. The people in Ambazonia say they've been treated like strangers in their own land, denied proper political representation, access to fair education, jobs, and equal development. What began as peaceful protests years ago quickly escalated into an armed conflict when the government cracked down with force, jailing activists and shooting unarmed demonstrators. It's against this background that fighters known as the Amber Boys were born. They picked up arms not because they wanted war, but because, in their eyes, peace had already been taken away from them. They began defending their villages and regions from what they saw as military occupation. On this particular day, according to eyewitnesses and circulating videos, the Amber Boys laid an ambush for the Cameroonian troops who were reportedly planning to invade through a narrow route. Using Ogbunigwe, an explosive device with deep roots in African military history, originally crafted during the Biafran War. They shocked and crippled the incoming forces. The device, simple but deadly, exploded with a thunderous force, causing immediate casualties and scattering the enemy. Within seconds, chaos erupted among the Cameroonian squad, and the Amber Boys rushed in, overpowered the remaining forces, and collected weapons and gear. What made this action particularly notable was not just the strategic execution, but the symbolic nature of it. It mirrored the kind of resistance the Biafran Liberation Army in Nigeria is known for. And indeed, in the heat of celebration and reflection after the attack, a vocal Biafran fighter came out in support of the Amber Boys. He took the opportunity to send a direct message to Musa and Asari fighters, two factions widely viewed as enemies of the Biafran struggle. His voice, intense with emotion, trembled with conviction as he boldly declared that he was not afraid of dying again. He mocked the attempts to silence him through threats and social media bullying. His chant was chilling but firm: Biafra or nothing. It wasn't just a cry of defiance. It was a personal declaration of sacrifice. In a separate but emotionally connected moment, a man who identified himself as Pastor Ibu appeared in the same video. With sweat dripping from his forehead, his eyes heavy with concern, he called upon all Igbo people to stop being indifferent. His voice cracked with desperation as he warned that danger was no longer far away. He urged the people to pray, yes, but more importantly, to prepare. "If you give me a gun now, I will fight," he declared. The video showed him pounding his chest, referencing Jesus Christ's sacrifice, and calling on every Biafran household to possess at least one weapon. He said those who wait to be defended by others would suffer alone when evil enters their compound. The central issue that we must not ignore in all of this is that both Ambazonia and Biafra are fighting for something they feel has long been denied to them: self-determination, respect, safety, and a dignified future. These two regions, one in Cameroon and the other in Nigeria, share more than just a history of colonial mismanagement. They also share a common fate of systemic suppression, violent crackdowns, and political abandonment. When you strip a people of their voice, and when you answer their pain with bullets, you teach them to see survival as war. The problem began as a political dispute, but poor leadership, ethnic discrimination, and excessive military responses turned it into a violent conflict. Cameroon, like Nigeria, has always struggled with unifying regions with different languages, cultures, and historical experiences. Instead of building unity through justice, the state used force. Instead of dialogue, it used bullets. That's how the problem escalated into a full-blown rebellion, with fighters like the Amber Boys deciding that defense was no longer an option. It had become a duty. What provoked this particular attack was the growing presence of Cameroonian military patrols near the borders of Ambazonia, which many in the local communities saw as preparation for a fresh offensive. The Amber Boys got wind of an approaching convoy and decided to strike first. According to local informants, they had been tracking the movement of the Camo squad for days, waiting for the right moment. The use of Ogbunigwe shows that these fighters are learning from history, possibly even collaborating or sharing tactics with others who have experience in armed resistance. The consequences of this event are significant. Firstly, the morale among Ambazonia fighters will rise. They will see this as a sign that victory, or at least meaningful resistance, is possible. Secondly, it will likely draw more international attention to the region, especially as videos of the aftermath spread across social media platforms. Thirdly, and more worryingly, it will almost certainly provoke a brutal military response from the Cameroonian government. Already known for launching scorched earth campaigns, the government may now retaliate with indiscriminate attacks on communities suspected of harboring Amber Boys. In Nigeria, this strike echoes through the forests and hills, where Biafran fighters are also engaged in a struggle for autonomy. The bold speech by the Biafran warrior who praised the Amber Boys shows a clear line of emotional and ideological connection. These fighters see each other not just as neighbors, but as brothers in a shared struggle. The mocking of Asari Boys and Musa factions reveals the growing tension among various militant groups in the region. For those in the Biafran camp, loyalty has become more important than ever, and betrayal is no longer taken lightly. The man's statement about not fearing death is not just bravado. It's a reflection of how hardened and emotionally wounded some of these fighters have become. As for solutions, they are few and far between, but not impossible. Dialogue remains the most viable path forward. However, both the Cameroonian and Nigerian governments have historically shown reluctance to engage sincerely with secessionist groups. They often label them as terrorists and criminals, making it difficult for open conversation to begin. Until these governments recognize the legitimacy of the grievances fueling these movements, peace will remain far out of reach. If any solution is on the horizon, it would require multiple layers. First, international mediation would be needed, someone neutral to bring the two sides to a table. Second, both Ambazonia and Biafra would need to establish clear political structures, so they speak with one voice rather than through scattered militant leaders. Third, there would need to be a transitional justice system to address the atrocities committed by all sides. Only when truth is told and healing begins can reconciliation be discussed. But we are far from that solution. Right now, the people on the ground feel abandoned, not just by their governments, but by the world. That's why voices like Pastor Ibu are rising louder. His message, though fiery, comes from a place of fear and love. He wants his people to survive. He wants them to know that no one is coming to save them if they don't first save themselves. His call for every household to arm themselves is controversial, but it reflects the desperation of a people who see no other option. What's happening in Ambazonia and Biafra is not just about guns and explosions. It's about identity, dignity, survival, and a desire for freedom. The use of Ogbunigwe is symbolic. It's a reminder that even the most oppressed can find ways to resist. The mocking of enemy factions and the bold statements about readiness to die again are not just emotional outbursts, they are testimonies of pain. In conclusion, the Ambazonia strike was more than just a military operation. It was a message, it was a reaction, and it was a warning. The Amber Boys are no longer scattered boys with machetes and sticks. They are becoming organized, intelligent, and bold. The Biafran support that followed it shows that the flame of resistance is burning across borders, and until real justice is delivered to these regions, those flames will only grow stronger. Peace is still possible, but it will not come through silence. It will not come through force. It will only come when the oppressed are heard, understood, and allowed to breathe freely. Whether it's Pastor Ibu's tearful prayer or the Biafran fighters' fearless chant, the message is the same. We will not die quietly. We will not live enslaved. We are ready. This is the state of things, for better or for worse. And unless someone steps in with compassion, vision, and courage, the region may witness more Ogbunigwe, more chanting warriors, and more blood spilled on soil that simply wants to be free. As the sun slowly rose over the battered hills between Ambazonia and the southern fringes of Cameroon, smoke still lingered from the night before. Charred earth, torn-up roadways, and remnants of twisted metal bore silent witness to the sheer force of the attack that had shaken the area. It wasn't just another skirmish in a forgotten corner of Africa, it had become a statement to the world. The Amber Boys had made it clear. They were not going to surrender, not going to bow, and not going to allow their lands to be overrun. The Cameroonian military, especially the Camo squad involved in the failed operation, was left stunned. According to one survivor who was quietly evacuated to a nearby outpost, the convoy had believed they were moving undetected. They had maps, drone footage, and intelligence reports, all suggesting that the area was lightly defended. But as they would later realize, that data had been manipulated or leaked. Someone had tipped off the Amber Boys. The attackers had used a terrain they knew well, narrow valleys, overgrown trails, and ancient forest paths, to conceal themselves for hours. Their patience, combined with an eerie silence in the lead-up to the ambush, had lulled the Camo squad into a false sense of control. But then came the thunder. The Ogbunigwe exploded with such intensity that it didn't just destroy one of the lead trucks, it disoriented everyone around it. Several soldiers lost their hearing temporarily. Others, caught in the blast radius, were immediately taken down. In the aftermath, the Amber Boys emerged in a swift offensive line, their eyes clear, their movements coordinated, and their purpose unmistakable. They didn't just kill, they captured. Rifles, grenades, tactical radios, and even encrypted data tablets were collected. One of the Amber Boys, nicknamed Thunder, was seen in the viral video holding a seized camo helmet in one hand while raising his weapon in the other. He shouted something in Pidgin that loosely translated to, "Let them send more, we will roast them like corn." This phrase alone lit up social media platforms across West Africa. Biafran activists, especially those aligned with the Liberation Army, shared the video as proof that African liberation fighters could outwit national armies. In response to this, a young Biafran fighter from the Delta region recorded a video of his own, standing before a tree marked with bullet holes. He spoke without flinching, challenging the Musa and Asari boys, militia groups rumored to be working against Biafran interests, to come forward if they dared. His words were laced with pain and pride. "I have died before. You think threats can shake me? Biafra or nothing." His message caught fire. Within hours, Biafran pages on platforms like Telegram and Facebook lit up with messages of solidarity. Some called for a joint strategy between Biafran and Ambazonian fighters. Others warned of coming retaliation from Cameroon and Nigeria, urging civilians in volatile areas to relocate or fortify their homes. Back in Ambazonia, residents of nearby villages began singing freedom songs in the evenings. For them, this wasn't just about military victories, it was about survival. The mothers, who for years had hidden their children during midnight raids, began expressing cautious hope that maybe the tide was turning. One woman, Mama Chica, who lost 2 sons to government raids, said while holding her grandchild, "If our boys can do this, maybe my granddaughter will grow up free." But even as hope began to simmer, fear remained a heavy cloud. Everyone knew retaliation was inevitable. The Cameroonian government had never taken such losses lightly. The past had taught Ambazonians what could come next. Helicopter gunships, house-to-house searches, mass arrests, disappearances in the night. Human rights organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch were quickly alerted. They had documented many such retaliations before, and their teams began gathering evidence in anticipation of what might unfold. Meanwhile, the spiritual undertones of this movement grew stronger. Pastor Ibu, whose sermon had gone viral, became an unexpected voice of this resistance. His message, though initially dismissed by some as mere spiritual noise, began resonating even among the hardened fighters. He was soon invited to speak at community gatherings, where people wept and prayed together, holding makeshift crosses in one hand and homemade weapons in the other. He spoke not just of heaven, but of duty. "Jesus fought with love," he said, "but if your enemy comes to destroy your children and you have the means to protect them, what would love ask you to do?" The answer seemed clear for many. Across Biafran territories, more young men began joining the local militias. Not everyone picked up a gun, but thousands began providing intelligence, food, and shelter. Mothers began sewing uniforms. Youths started forging communication devices using spare radio parts. Even those in the diaspora began raising funds through online platforms. A popular Nigerian-British YouTuber donated £5,000 within 24 hours of the video going viral, stating, "These are not terrorists, these are freedom fighters, and they need our help." But with growth comes vulnerability. The Nigerian and Cameroonian governments had long been monitoring these developments. After the attack, security agencies began sweeping social media for digital fingerprints. Arrests started happening in towns like Bamenda and Enugu. Innocent youth were rounded up simply for having a Biafran flag on their phone. In some regions, military checkpoints doubled. Community leaders were summoned and warned to denounce the movements or face consequences. Churches were watched. Pastors were questioned. Even Pastor Ibu reportedly went into hiding after rumors surfaced that a bounty had been placed on his head. Yet, his voice didn't vanish. In a pre-recorded audio shared 2 days later, he said, "They may find me, they may silence me, but this message cannot die. If you have ears, hear this. Prepare. Evil is coming. You must protect your children. You must not fold your hands." In the diplomatic circles, murmurs began to rise. Ambazonia's exiled leadership reached out to embassies in Canada and Germany, seeking protective status for fighters and families at risk. Some members of the African Union began quietly discussing the possibility of sending observers, though nothing was officially declared. The United Nations, as usual, issued a brief statement urging restraint on all sides and calling for dialogue. But for those in the forest zones of Ambazonia or in the volatile regions of Biafra, these statements meant little. They had heard such words before, often followed by silence and then gunfire. What began as one ambush became a ripple. The confidence it inspired, the voices it awakened, the alliances it deepened, it all formed part of a growing wave. It was no longer just about territory. It was about a people rediscovering their strength, reclaiming their voice, and refusing to remain quiet. At night, in both Biafra and Ambazonia, the songs grew louder. Children who once cried during gunshots now danced to revolutionary music. Old men recited stories of past resistance movements. Women hummed prayers while grinding maize. And amid it all, the words of the Biafran fighter rang clearly in the hearts of many. We are not afraid to die again. This movement may not have tanks or drones. It may not have international recognition or big flags at the United Nations. But what it has is perhaps more dangerous. A population that has decided it has nothing left to lose. And that, in the history of revolutions, is often how liberation begins.
Swago. Wow. That's a great thing. That's a great thing. That's a great thing. That's a great dragon of Ando. That's a cat standing there. No mercy. That's a dragon of Ando. That Ando something. This is the only final. The final corn. Now what it is? Na moto no shake. Moto no shake. Na inda for we. Na inda for we siam. Na moto that for day.